May 30th, 2025, General Aviation News publishes an article, Me-262 jet pointed to the future as it slipped into the past. The article details how the swept-wing design of the Messerschmitt Me-262 from 1944 became the foundation for every modern airliner: Boeing 737, Airbus A320, F-35 Lightning. They all fly with a design that German engineers pioneered 81 years ago. And the story of how this design ended up in American hands is a tale of systematic technological appropriation that's been largely kept quiet until now. Today, I'm going to show you the documented technical lineage, from the drawing boards in Augsburg in 1942 to the over 10,000 Boeing 737s filling our skies today. We'll examine original sources, patents, the names of the engineers who developed this technology, and those who, let's just say, adapted it. But before we dive into the technical details, you need to understand why swept wings were revolutionary in the first place, and why the Me-262 was the first aircraft to bring this concept to life. The year is 1935. All aircraft have straight wings, perpendicular to the fuselage. That's the state of the art. No one is questioning it. But German aerodynamicists at the Aviation Research Institute in Braunschweig discover something extraordinary. When wings with a swept-wing design, angled backward, are tested, the effects of approaching the speed of sound are shifted. Drag at high speeds is dramatically reduced. In 1935, Dr. Adolf Busemann presents his research on swept wings for high-speed flight at the Volta Conference in Rome. The Allied attendees don't grasp the implications. They largely ignore the presentation. But the German engineers, they understand, and they immediately begin to experiment. 1939. Messerschmitt AG in Augsburg is working on Project P Tunnel 65, which would become the Me-262, the world's first operational jet fighter. The initial designs feature straight wings, conventional design. But then, a problem arises. The BMW 003 engines are heavier than anticipated. The aircraft is nose-heavy. The center of gravity is off. The engineers need a solution, and fast. Chief Engineer Voldemar Voigt makes a suggestion. What if they sweep the wings back? An 18.5-degree swept-wing design. This would shift the center of lift rearward, rebalancing the center of gravity, but it would also do something else. It would massively improve aerodynamic efficiency at high speeds. The Me-262 first flies on July 18, 1942, with the Jumo Z04 engines. The swept wing angle is exactly 18.5 degrees. This number becomes the foundation for all modern aviation. But in 1942, no one outside of Germany understands what they're seeing. The Me-262 reaches 540 miles per hour, 870 kilometers per hour. No Allied aircraft even comes close to those speeds. The fastest British Spitfire manages 404 mph, 650 kilometers per hour. The American P-51 Mustang hits 437 mph, 703 kilometers per hour. The Me-262 is over 100 mph, 167 kilometers per hour. Faster. In aviation, that's an eternity. But this is where it gets technically interesting. The swept-wing design alone isn't the only factor. It's the combination of the swept-wing design, the airfoil, and the aerodynamic integration. The Me-262 uses a symmetrical airfoil with an 11.5% thickness-to-chord ratio. The sweep begins at the wing root and is constant across the entire span. The boundary layer remains stable at high speeds. Compare that to Allied designs of the time. The P-80 Shooting Star, America's first jet, flies in 1944 with straight wings. 540 mph, 870 kilometers per hour, top speed. But only for short bursts and with extreme drag, the British Gloucester Meteor, also with straight wings, manages 415 mm, 668 kilometers per hour. Both aircraft struggle with control problems at high speeds. Buffeting. Control surfaces become spongy. The pilots are fighting the aircraft. The Me-262 doesn't have these problems. The swept-wing design stabilizes the aircraft. Controllability is maintained right up to top speed. American test pilots who fly captured Me-262s after the war are shocked. Major Robert Strobel from Wright Field writes in his August 1945 report, "German aerodynamics are years ahead of us. The swept-wing design solves problems we didn't even know existed. But in 1944, the Allies still don't know what the swept-wing design is doing. They see the Me-262 in the sky, they see the speed, but they don't understand the physics behind it. Until one day in April 1945, George Schairer, aerodynamic engineer at North American Aviation, he's part of a technical intelligence mission in Germany, Operation Lusty. The Allies have discovered German research facilities. Schairer is sent to the German Gliding Research Institute in Braunschweig. There, he finds something unbelievable. Hundreds of research reports, wind tunnel tests, calculations, all about swept-wing aerodynamics for high-speed flight. Dr. Adolf Bussmann's work from 1935. Now fully developed and validated, the mathematical models are complete. The experimental data is comprehensive. The Germans don't just have the theory, they have the practice, and it's all documented. On May 1st, 1945, Schairer sends a telegram to North American Aviation in Los Angeles. Quote, "Stop the wind tunnel. We have found the Germans who solved the problem." End quote. The telegram changes American aviation forever. But we need to understand what's really happening in this moment. North American Aviation has been developing the XP-86 Sabre jet since 1944, a jet fighter intended to outperform the Me-262. The initial designs feature straight wings, classic American design, conservative, safe, and completely inadequate. When Schairer reads the German research reports, he understands immediately. America's jet program is based on outdated aerodynamics. The Germans aren't years ahead. They're decades ahead, and all the answers are in these documents. North American Aviation immediately halts all work on the XP-86. The entire design is reworked. The straight wings are scrapped. New wings with a swept-wing design are engineered. But here's the critical part. They don't simply copy the Me-262. They study the German calculations and develop their own variation. Over 100 different wing designs are tested. Different sweep angles, different airfoils, different thickness ratios. The engineers work feverishly. The goal, to find the perfect swept-wing design for the Sabre, and they find it 35 degrees, much more than the Me-262. But based on those exact same German research principles, the F-86 Sabre takes flight for the first time on October 1st, 1947. It instantly hits 675 miles per hour, faster than the Me-262. But that's not the whole story. The aircraft is stable, it's controllable. The swept-wing design performs exactly as the German calculations predicted. In the Korean War, from 1950 to 1953, the F-86 Sabre dominates the airspace. 792 confirmed kills of enemy aircraft. Most of them MiG-15s, which, ironically, also had swept wings, based on the same German research the Soviets found in their occupation zones. The Korean War was essentially a duel between two aircraft, both leveraging German aerodynamic knowledge. But the F-86 is just the beginning. As soon as swept-wing technology is proven, every aircraft manufacturer adopts the design. Boeing develops the B-47 Stratojet bomber, 35-degree sweep, directly based on German research data. The B-52 Stratofortress follows, 35-degree sweep. Still in service today. Then come the airliners, and this is where the story gets really interesting, because every commercial jet aircraft in the world uses swept wings, without exception. Boeing 707, 1958, first American jet airliner. 35-degree sweep. Boeing 727, 32-degree sweep. Boeing 737, 25-degree sweep. Boeing 747, 37.5-degree sweep. Boeing 777, 31.6-degree sweep. Boeing 787, 32.2-degree sweep. Every single model leverages swept wing aerodynamics. Based on German research from 1935 to 1945, Airbus is no different. A320, 25-degree sweep. A330, 30-degree sweep. A350, 31.9-degree sweep. A380, 33.5-degree sweep. European aircraft, but with German technology that's now over 80 years old, and the modern fighter jets, F-35 Lightning II, the most advanced combat aircraft in the world, swept wings, F-22 Raptor, swept wings, Dassault Rafale, swept wings, Eurofighter Typhoon, Delta wings with sweep, Sukhoi Su-57, swept wings. Look at the numbers. In 2025, there are roughly 28,000 commercial aircraft in active service worldwide. Every single one has swept wings. That means 28,000 aircraft using technology that German engineers developed and perfected between 1935 and 1944. Let's dig deeper. Boeing has built over 10,000 Boeing 737s, the most produced commercial airliner in history. Every 737 has wings with a 25-degree sweep, and that sweep is based directly on the principles that Dr. Adolf Busemann presented in 1935, and that Messerschmitt implemented in the Me-262 in 1942. But here's where it gets even more technical. Because sweep isn't just about speed. It's about boundary layer control, lift distribution, and wave drag reduction. Let me explain. When a wing moves through the air, it creates a boundary layer, a thin layer of air right on the wing's surface, where the speed increases from 0 at the surface to the full free-stream velocity. At high speeds, this boundary layer becomes turbulent. Turbulence means drag. Drag means energy loss. Swept wings change the way the boundary layer behaves. The airflow over a swept wing has two components: a normal component perpendicular to the wing's leading edge, and a spanwise component parallel to the wing's leading edge. The effective Mach number the wing experiences is based on the normal component. That means a swept wing can fly faster before experiencing the effects of supersonic flow. The Me-262, with its 18.5-degree sweep, raised the critical Mach number by roughly 5%. That doesn't sound like much, but at 540 miles per hour, that makes the difference between controllable flight and dangerous instability. The German engineers understood this in 1942. The American engineers didn't understand it until George Schairer showed them the German reports. And even then, it took them years to fully understand the math. North American Aviation tested over 100 wing designs for the F-86 Sabre. 100. Every test was based on German research data. Every wind tunnel test validated German calculations. In the end, the Americans didn't invent something new. They found the optimal design within the German research framework. And here's the point that never gets mentioned. The Germans had already tested all these variations. The research reports in Braunschweig contained data for sweeps from 15 degrees to 45 degrees, different Reynolds numbers, different Mach numbers, different airfoil profiles. The American engineers tested 100 designs over 3 years. The German engineers had tested thousands of designs over 10 years. That's the difference between innovation and imitation. The Germans developed the foundational science. They discovered the principles. They built the mathematical models. They conducted the experiments. They turned the knowledge into working aircraft. The Americans found the finished research reports and applied them. None of this is secret. The technical reports are public. NASA Technical Report R67 documents the swept-wing development. The names of the German researchers are in there. Dr. Adolf Busemann, Dr. Albert Betz, Dr. Max Munk. Operation Paperclip files confirm the systematic appropriation of German aviation research. George Schairer himself later wrote in his autobiography about the day he found the German reports. But the general public knows none of this. Aviation textbooks mention swept wings as a post-war American innovation. The Me-262 is dismissed as an interesting curiosity. Willy Messerschmitt and his team of engineers are never mentioned. The German research from 1935 to 1945 is ignored. Why? Because it's inconvenient. Because the narrative of Allied technological superiority falls apart. Because the story is more complicated than they want to write in textbooks. Every time you get on an airplane, Boeing, Airbus, whatever, look at the wings. The sweep you see goes directly back to the work of German aerodynamicists from over 80 years ago. Every time you see a military aircraft, F-35, Rafale, Typhoon, recognize the swept wings. German design from 1944. And that's just the beginning of the story, because what happened with the swept wing happened with dozens of other German technologies. Turbo pumps for rockets, regenerative cooling for rocket engines, swept wings for airplanes, torsion bar suspension for tanks. It's the same pattern every time. German development, Allied appropriation, American production, and historical amnesia. But let's stick with the swept wing design for a moment. Because the story gets even more complicated. It's not just about George Schairer and North American aviation, it's about Operation Paperclip, a systematic technology grab at the government level. It's about German engineers being deported to America, about patents being expropriated, about a coordinated campaign to Americanize German engineering. March 28, 1945. Operation Lusty begins. Lusty stands for Luftwaffe Secret Technology, a combined American-British mission to seize German aviation technology. Over 1,500 tons of documents are transported from Peenemünde, Braunschweig and Augsburg. Research reports, wind tunnel data, construction drawings, patent specifications, everything. The German Gliding Research Institute in Braunschweig is completely emptied. Every filing cabinet, every folder, every calculation. The American officers know what they've found. Gold. Technological gold worth billions of dollars, but documents alone aren't enough. You need the engineers who understand these documents, the ones who conducted the experiments, the ones who know what assumptions underlie the calculations. And so the second phase begins. The recruitment. Dr. Adolf Busemann, the man who laid the theoretical foundation for swept wings in 1935. In July 1947, he is brought to America. Operation Paperclip. He's taken to NASA Langley Research Center. There he works on high-speed aerodynamics for the next 20 years. His German research becomes the basis for American supersonic aircraft. Dr. Albert Betz, director of the Aerodynamic Institute in Göttingen, also Operation Paperclip, brought to America. His wind tunnel data on swept wings is classified and passed on to Boeing, Douglas, Lockheed. American companies use his work, but his name appears nowhere. The list goes on. Over 120 German aerodynamicists were brought to the USA between 1945 and 1952, not as prisoners of war, as technical consultants. Their files were sanitized, their Nazi past was erased, they were given new identities, American salaries, and American jobs. In return, they handed over their knowledge. But it wasn't just Operation Paperclip. There was also Operation Surgeon, which ran on the British side. The Soviets had their own version. Every Allied power grabbed German technology, and the swept wings were just a small part of it. Let's take a look at the patents. This is where the story becomes really revealing, because patents don't lie. They document exactly who invented what, when. German Reich Patent number 71336, filed on October 4, 1939, by Messerschmitt AG. Title, Wing with Rearward Swept Leading Edge for High-Speed Aircraft. That's the original patent for the Me-262 wing design. Detailed drawings, calculations, test results, everything documented. This patent was expropriated after the war. Under Allied Control Council Law number 25, all German patents were classified as enemy property and seized. They were transferred to American and British companies for $0. $0 for technology worth billions. Let's look at American patents. U.S. Patent 2576-981, filed in 1946 by North American Aviation. Title, Swept Wing Aircraft Design. The content, exactly the swept wing aerodynamics from the German research reports. The formulas are identical, the drawings are similar, but the patent holder is American. Boeing filed 47 patents between 1947 and 1960 for various swept-wing configurations. Every single one is based on German preliminary work. None of these patents mentions Dr. Adolf Busemann, Dr. Albert Betz, or the German Gliding Research Institute. History is being rewritten, and it works. To this day, most people believe that swept wings are an American post-war innovation. Textbooks write about the F-86 Sabre as a breakthrough. Boeing is celebrated as a pioneer of commercial jet aviation. The German roots are kept secret, but the numbers don't lie. Let's look at how much money was made with this technology. Boeing alone has sold over 15,000 commercial aircraft since 1958. The average price of a Boeing aircraft is about $120 million. That's over $8 trillion in sales. A significant portion of that revenue is based on swept wing efficiency. Efficiency based on German research from 1935 to 1945. Airbus is similar. Over 12,000 aircraft sold since 1974. Average price approximately $110 million. That's over $1.3 trillion. Again, based on swept-wing technology developed by German engineers, even more in military applications. The F-86 Sabre. 9,860 built. The F-15 Eagle with its swept wings. Over 1 to 200 built. The F-35 Lightning II, 1,000 planned, unit price $110 million. That's $110 billion for an aircraft that uses German swept-wing aerodynamics. Let's add it all up. Commercial aviation plus military plus freight. Worldwide, approximately 50,000 jet aircraft with swept wings have been built since 1945. The estimated total value of these aircraft is over $5 trillion. $5 trillion based on technology that German engineers developed and for which they never received a cent in royalties. And it continues. Every day, Boeing 737 MAX, the latest Boeing jet, swept wings with 25 degrees, based on the same principles as the Me-262 from 1942, Airbus A321neo, swept wings with 25 degrees, German design 81 years old, in a European aircraft from 2025. The irony is obvious. Airbus is a European consortium. Germany is one of the main partners. German engineers at Airbus are designing aircraft with swept wings, technology that their predecessors invented 81 years ago. But the connection is never mentioned. The continuity is never acknowledged. But this is where it gets philosophically interesting. Is this theft or technological evolution? The arguments exist on both sides. Pro-American perspective, Germany lost the war. Spoils of war have always been legitimate historically. The Allies took German technology as part of the reparations. Furthermore, American engineers further developed the technology. The F-86 with its 35-degree sweep is not identical to the Me-262 with its 18.5-degree sweep. That's improvement, not copying. Pro-German perspective. Patents are property. They can't just be dispossessed simply because a government loses a war. The engineers who developed this technology never received recognition or compensation. Their names have been erased from history. This is systematic theft of intellectual property at a governmental level. Where does the truth lie? Probably somewhere in the middle, but one thing is clear. The story, as it's told today, is incomplete. The role of German engineering in the development of modern aviation is systematically minimized, and that's unjust. Let me give you a concrete example. I'm talking with an aeronautical engineering student. I ask, who invented swept wings? He answers, Boeing, in the 1950s. I show him Dr. Adolf Bussmann's work from 1935. He's shocked. He'd never even heard of it. His textbook mentions German research, with a side note for 10 years of groundbreaking work. This doesn't happen by accident. This is deliberate historical rewriting, and it works, because most people don't question the technical details. They see a Boeing airplane, and they think American technology. They see an F-35 Lightning, and they think American innovation. The German roots are invisible. But for those who read the technical sources, the truth is obvious. NASA Technical Report R67 says it directly. German aerodynamicists of the 1930s and early 1940s laid the theoretical and experimental foundation for high-speed swept wings. American researchers built on this work. That's a direct quote. NASA itself admits it. But who reads technical NASA reports anyway? And here's something you might not know. The modern aviation industry knows this. Boeing engineers know where swept wings come from. Airbus engineers know it. NASA knows it. But they don't talk about it because it's inconvenient, because it raises questions. If we've so systematically adopted German technology, what does that say about our own innovative power? If the Me-262 was already solving problems in 1944 that Allied aircraft couldn't solve, what does that say about the state of Allied engineering? These questions are uncomfortable, so they aren't asked. But the technology speaks for itself. Every time an aircraft takes off with swept wings, that's evidence. Evidence of German engineering, evidence of the foresight of German researchers in the 1930s, evidence of the technical superiority that Germany possessed in certain areas. And that brings me back to the article from May 30th, 2025. Me-262 jet pointed to the future as it slipped into the past. The title is perfect. The Me-262 pointed to the future. It demonstrated technology that only became mainstream decades later, but it slipped into the past, forgotten and ignored, while its technology conquered the world. Today, 81 years after the first flight of the Me-262, over 28,000 commercial aircraft are flying with its design. Over 10,000 Boeing 737s alone. Every 737 you see carries the legacy of Voldemar Voigt, the chief engineer, who decided in 1939 to sweep the wings by 18.5 degrees. Every 737 is a flying monument to German engineering, but no one knows it. If these truths aren't just history, but the foundation of every flight you take, every technology you use, every smartphone in your pocket, every rocket that launches into space. If you appreciate these technical connections being documented and preserved, if you want the true inventors not to be forgotten, then you can support this channel with a super thanks. Every contribution helps to research, verify, and make these stories accessible to a wider audience. Because the truth deserves to be told, let's finish the story. Because there's a recent development that makes this whole narrative even more relevant. In March 2025, the Boeing 737 MAX 10, the latest variant of the 737 family, flew its first test flight, 25 degrees of sweep, exactly the same sweep principle as in 1944. But here's the difference. Boeing developed these wings with state-of-the-art computer simulations. Artificial intelligence tested thousands of variations. The aerodynamic calculations were performed on supercomputers. And what came out? 25 degrees of sweep, exactly in the range of what German researchers had already identified as optimal in the 1940s. The physics hasn't changed. The airflow follows the same equations. The boundary layer dynamics are the same. What German aerodynamicists figured out with wind tunnels and slide rules. Modern computers confirm with billions of calculations. That's not an opinion, that's physics, and that's perhaps the greatest recognition. 81 years later, with all the technological advancements of the modern era, we keep coming back to the same conclusions that German engineers reached in the 1930s and 1940s. Their work wasn't just good, it was fundamentally correct. Imagine you're an engineer at Messerschmitt in 1942. You have no computers, no CAD software, no computational fluid dynamics. You have a wind tunnel, paper, a slide rule, and your brain. And with these tools, you develop a wing design that 81 years later is still the basis for every modern jet. That's extraordinary. The Me-262 wasn't perfect. It had problems. The Jumo 004 engines were unreliable. The materials were wartime scarce. Production was chaotic. But the aerodynamic design of the wings, that was brilliant. And that's what has survived. Not the politics and not the ideology, not the regime, just the pure engineering. And that's a lesson that goes beyond aviation. Good technology survives. It transcends its origins. It becomes universal. The swept wings of the Me-262 are now American, European, Russian, Chinese. They belong to no one and everyone. They are part of the shared technological heritage of humanity. But that doesn't mean that we should forget where they came from. Dr. Adolf Busemann deserves recognition. Woldemar Voigt deserves recognition. The teams of engineers in Braunschweig and Augsburg who worked on this problem for years deserve recognition. They made a fundamental contribution to human civilization, and they should be remembered for it. Imagine a world without swept wings. No Boeing 747s for long-haul flights. No fast military jets. No efficient commercial aviation. The entire modern world would be different. Travel would take longer. Costs would be higher. Globalization as we know it simply wouldn't be possible. Swept-wing designs, they made the modern world possible. And these swept-wing designs, they came from Germany during the darkest years of the 20th century. That's the complexity of this history. Innovation doesn't only come from good people during good times. Sometimes it emerges from the most unexpected places. And perhaps that's the most important lesson here. Technology is neutral. It has no inherent morality. It has no politics. A swept-wing design functions according to the same physical laws, regardless of who builds it or why. And good technology, it spreads because it works. The Me-262's swept wings, they worked. So they were copied by Americans, by Soviets, by Brits, by the French, and eventually by the whole world. Now this isn't about simple theft. This is how technology evolves. Good ideas get adopted. Bad ideas, they die out. But we owe the inventors remembrance. We owe them recognition. We owe them a place in history, and that's what hasn't happened for the past 81 years. The German inventors of swept-wing technology have been largely forgotten, while their invention conquered the world. That is slowly starting to change now. Articles, like the one from May 30th, 2025, are bringing this story back into the light. Books, like Douglas O'Regan's Taking Nazi Technology, document this systematic appropriation. The truth is coming to the surface, and slowly, but steadily. And every time you see a modern jet airliner, you'll know it. The swept wings, the elegant design, the efficiency that makes long-range flight possible. That comes from Germany. That comes from engineers who created something extraordinary 81 years ago. And that deserves acknowledgement. The Boeing 737. It uses a swept-wing design originating from the 1944 Me-262, George Schairer. He directly copied German research from Braunschweig. 81 years later, over 10,000 Boeing 737s are flying with that design. Is this technical evolution or systematic appropriation of German engineering prowess? What do you think? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to discover more about the true origins of modern technologies, subscribe to this channel, because the story is far more complicated than we've been led to believe.